crowded with Polynesian idols and Polynesian dancing garments, and all the simple immodest accessories to life in Polynesia, to a seat among the mummies. She was trying to bring her problems to a head, and her mind insisted upon being even more discursive and atmospheric than usual. It generalized everything she put to it. "Why should women be dependent on men?" she asked, and the question was at once converted into a system of variations upon the theme of why are things as they are? Why are human beings viviparous? Why are people hungry thrice a day? Why does one faint at danger? She stood for a time looking at the dry limbs and still human face of that desiccated, unwrapped mummy from the very beginnings of social life. It looked very patient, she thought, and a little self-satisfied. It looked as if it had taken its world for granted and prospered on that assumption, a world in which children were trained to obey their elders and the wills of women overruled as a matter of course. It was wonderful to think this thing had lived, had felt and suffered. Perhaps once it had desired some other human being intolerably. Perhaps some one had kissed the brow that was now so cadaverous, rubbed that sunken cheek with loving fingers, held that stringy neck with passionately living hands. But all of that was forgotten. In the end, it seemed to be thinking, they embalmed me with the utmost respect, sound spices chosen to endure, the best. I took my world as I found it. Things are so. Part 3. Ann Veronica's first impression of Kitty Brett was that she was aggressive and disagreeable. Her next was that she was a person of amazing persuasive power. She was perhaps 23 and very pink and healthy-looking, showing a great deal of white and rounded neck above her business-like but altogether feminine blouse, and a good deal of plump, gesticulating forearm out of a short sleeve. She had animated dark blue-gray eyes under her fine eyebrows, and dark brown hair that rolled back simply and effectively from her broad, low forehead. And she was about as capable of intelligent argument as a runaway steam-roller. She was a trained being, trained by an implacable mother to one end. She spoke with fluent enthusiasm. She did not so much deal with Ann Veronica's interpolations as dispose of them with quick and use-hardened repartee. And then she went on with a fine directness to sketch the case for her agitation, for that remarkable rebellion of the women that was then agitating the whole world of politics and discussion. She assumed with a kind of mesmeric force all the propositions that Ann Veronica wanted her to define. "What do we want? What is the goal?" asked Ann Veronica. "Freedom! Citizenship! And the way to that, the way to everything, is the vote." Ann Veronica said something about a general change of ideas. "How can you change people's ideas if you have no power?" said Kitty Brett. Ann Veronica was not ready enough to deal with that counterstroke. "One doesn't want to turn the whole thing into a mere sex antagonism." "When women get justice," said Kitty Brett, "there will be no sex antagonism. None at all. Until then we mean to keep on hammering away." "It seems to me that much of a woman's difficulties are economic." "That will follow," said Kitty Brett. "That will follow." She interrupted as Ann Veronica was about to speak again, with a bright contagious hopefulness. "Everything will follow," she said. "Yes," said Ann Veronica, trying to think where they were, trying to get things plain again that had seemed plain enough in the quiet of the night. "Nothing was ever done," Miss Brett asserted, "without a certain element of faith. After we have got the vote and are recognized as citizens, then we can come to all these other things." Even in the glamour of Miss Brett's assurance, it seemed to Ann Veronica that this was, after all, no more than the gospel of Miss Miniver with a new set of resonances. And like that gospel, it meant something, something different from its phrases, something elusive, and yet something that in spite of the superficial incoherence of its phrasing was largely essentially true. There was something holding women down, holding women back, and if it wasn't exactly man-made law was an aspect of it. There was something indeed holding the whole species back from the imaginable largeness of life. "The vote is the symbol of everything," said Miss Brett. She made an abrupt personal appeal. "Oh, please don't lose yourself in a wilderness of secondary considerations," she said. "Don't ask me to tell you all that women can do, all that women can be. There is a new life, different from the old life of dependence, possible. If only we are not divided, if only we work together. This is the one movement that brings women of different classes together for a common purpose. If you could see how it gives them souls! Women who have taken things for granted, who have given themselves up altogether to pettiness and vanity." "Give me something to do," said Ann Veronica, interrupting her persuasions at last. "It has been very kind of you to see me, but I don't want to sit and talk and use your time any longer. I want to do something. I want to hammer myself against all this that pens women in. I feel that I shall stifle unless I can do something, and do something soon." Part 4. It was not Ann Veronica's fault that the night's work should have taken upon itself the forms of wild burlesque. She was in deadly earnest in everything she did. It seemed to her the last desperate attack upon the universe that would not let her live as she desired to live, that penned her in and controlled her, directed her, and disapproved of her, the same invincible wrappering, the same leaden tyranny of a universe that she had vowed to overcome after that memorable conflict with her father at Morningside Park. She was listed for the raid. She was informed it was to be a raid upon the House of Commons, though no particulars were given her, and told to go alone to 14 Dexter Street, Westminster, and not to ask any policeman to direct her. 14 Dexter Street, Westminster, she found was not a house, but a yard in an obscure street, with big gates and the name of Podgers and Carlo, carriers and furniture removers, thereon. She was perplexed by this, and stood for some seconds in the empty street hesitating, until the appearance of another circumspect woman under the street lamp at the corner reassured her. In one of the big gates was a little door, and she rapped at this. It was immediately opened by a man with light eyelashes and a manner suggestive of restrained passion. "Come right in," he hissed under his breath, with a true conspirator's note, closed the door very softly and pointed. "Through here." By the meagre light of a gas lamp she perceived a cobbled yard with 4 large furniture vans standing with horses and lamps alight. A slender young man wearing glasses appeared from the shadow of the nearest van. "Are you A, B, C, or D?" he asked. "They told me D," said Ann Veronica. "Through here," he said, and pointed with the pamphlet he was carrying. Ann Veronica found herself in a little stirring crowd of excited women, whispering and tittering and speaking in undertones. The light was poor, so that she saw their gleaming faces dimly and indistinctly. No one spoke to her. She stood among them, watching them and feeling curiously alien to them. The oblique, ruddy lighting distorted them oddly, made queer bars and patches of shadow upon their clothes. "It's Kitty's idea," said one. "We are to go in the vans." "Kitty is wonderful," said another. "Wonderful." "I have always longed for prison service," said a woman. "Always. From the beginning. But it's only now I'm able to do it." A little blonde creature close at hand suddenly gave way to a fit of hysterical laughter, and caught up the end of it with a sob. "Before I took up the suffrage," a firm, flat voice remarked, "I could scarcely walk upstairs without palpitations." Someone hidden from Ann Veronica appeared to be marshalling the assembly. "We have to get in, I think," said a nice little old lady in a bonnet to Ann Veronica, speaking with a voice that quavered a little. "My dear, can you see in this light? I think I would like to get in. Which is C?" Ann Veronica, with a curious sinking of the heart, regarded the black cavities of the vans. Their doors stood open, and placards with big letters indicated the section assigned to each. She directed the little old woman, and then made her way to Van D. A young woman with a white badge on her arm stood and counted the sections as they entered their vans. "When they tap the roof," she said in a voice of authority, "you are to come out. You will be opposite the big entrance in Old Palace Yard. It's the public entrance. You are to make for that and get into the lobby if you can, and so try and reach the floor of the House, crying 'Votes for Women' as you go." She spoke like a mistress addressing school children. "Don't bunch too much as you come out," she added. "All right. asked the man with the light eyelashes.